The war had lasted a century, a relentless deadlock between the Imperium of Karash and the Zyrax Dominion. Entire worlds had burned, trillions had perished, yet the lines on the galactic map remained unchanged. Battles were waged, treaties were signed and broken, but nothing ever truly changed. Victory was an illusion both sides chased through blood and ruin. Then humanity arrived. General Elias Graves stood before the Galactic Council, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. The chamber, filled with warlords and high commanders of both factions, had erupted in laughter minutes ago. Now, only the echoes remained, their arrogance fading into suspicion. The Karash Warmaster, Korak Thale, studied the lone human with a sneer curling his scaled lips. "You claim your people will win this war in 5 hours?" His deep voice rumbled through the hall, thick with amusement. "We have fought for 100 years. You think you can do in hours what we could not accomplish in generations?" Graves remained unmoved. A tap on his holopad brought up a detailed projection of the battlefield. The planet Vorshan, 6 flickered into view, covered in red markings that represented active combat zones. A conflict spanning decades, frozen in place, neither side gaining ground. Then a new overlay appeared, blue markers, precise and minimal, spread across critical locations. "This is how it ends," Graves stated. His voice was calm, almost indifferent. Vrashik, the Zyrax Supreme Commander, leaned closer, his mandibles clicking in amusement. "And how, exactly, do you intend to achieve this miracle? Your kind is untested, unproven. We assumed you would be," he searched for the word, "assistants in this war. Not the ones to finish it." Graves simply pressed a button. "Deployment has begun." There was a moment of confusion. Then alarms blared through the war room. Live feeds from Vorshan, 6 flickered onto the main holodisplays. The battlefield was no longer static. Human dropships descended, not in a scattered, desperate charge like the Karash or Zyrax would have expected, but in razor-sharp precision. Each landing was a calculated strike. Entire divisions vanished off the tactical map within seconds. The first targets weren't enemy soldiers. They were command nodes. Deep in the bunkers beneath the surface, Karash generals barked orders to their subordinates, unaware that microdrones had already slipped through ventilation shafts. A few flickering sparks, a brief, muffled gasp, and every high-ranking officer was dead before their troops even knew they were under attack. On the front lines, human soldiers moved like phantoms. There was no traditional battle, no trenches to hold, no prolonged firefight. The Karash and Zyrax forces barely understood they were under siege before their defenses collapsed. Vrashik stiffened as the reality settled in. "Your forces are not fighting a battle, they are dismantling it." Thale slammed his fist on the table. "Rally the fleets. Cut off their reinforcement lines." "They don't have any," a Zyrax technician murmured in disbelief, analyzing the data. "They inserted directly into the critical zones. They didn't establish supply lines. They don't need them." The Imperium's mighty warships scrambled to intercept the human forces, expecting a prolonged engagement. Instead, their systems failed mid-flight. Orbital defense grids, designed to hold off entire fleets, flickered and shut down. Human warships hadn't even fired on them. They had simply hacked them from light years away. Thale's claws dug into the table as his fleet reports came in. Ships disabled. Communications severed. Troops surrendering without a single shot fired. "This isn't war," he snarled, his voice thick with disbelief. This is efficiency," Graves finished for him. It had taken only 50 minutes. The Karash war machine, a force that had conquered entire sectors, was crumbling. The Zyrax Dominion, seeing the inevitable, transmitted an immediate ceasefire request. Thale's body trembled with rage. "This is impossible. No species fights like this. Wars are waged over time, over attrition, over endurance. No one wins this fast." Graves turned to him, his expression finally shifting to something resembling amusement. "You don't understand, do you?" He gestured to the holodisplay, now filled with surrender signals blinking across the map. "Wars are only long when both sides refuse to end them. We don't fight for sport. We fight to win." Vrashik, once dismissive, now leaned forward carefully. How long have you had this capability? Graves met his many eyes. Long enough. Thale's nostrils flared, his scaled fists clenched. Then why did you wait until now? Graves deactivated the holodisplay. He exhaled, the faintest trace of a smile appearing. Because you never asked. The aftermath of the battle left a silence that no one in the Galactic Council chamber had ever experienced before. The war, once considered unending, was now over, not in months or weeks, but in mere hours. The Xyrax Dominion had surrendered. The Imperium of Karash was leaderless, its command structure shattered beyond repair. The long, grueling conflict that had defined an era had been erased in a single afternoon. The victors, a species no one had ever taken seriously. General Elias Graves watched the stunned expressions of the alien warlords. The Karash Warmaster, Korak Thale, sat motionless, his claws digging into the table, his reptilian nostrils flaring with suppressed rage. Across from him, Vrashik, the Xyrax Supreme Commander, seemed more dazed than angry. The weight of what had just transpired was settling over them like a crushing force. The silence was broken by a trembling voice from the Council's presiding officer, a neutral species meant to oversee war proceedings. It is done. The words were almost a whisper. The war is truly over. Graves didn't bother answering. The battlefield reports spoke for themselves. Enemy fortifications neutralized. Entire fleets rendered inoperable. High-value command structures erased before countermeasures could even be deployed. There was nothing left to fight for. You cheated, Thale hissed, his voice low and dangerous. His scaled hands flexed as if he longed to tear something apart. This was not war. This was butchery. Graves met his gaze without flinching. There was no rule stating war had to be slow. We were called to fight. We fought. And we won. Vrashik's mandibles twitched, his many black eyes narrowing. Your species is unlike anything we have encountered before. Not just in tactics. Not just in weapons. But in mindset. Graves remained silent, letting them process the truth. Humanity had not fought like they had expected. They had not charged recklessly into battle. They had not played the war like a game, dragging it out for power, for control, for the illusion of endless conflict. The Karash and Xyrax had been locked in the same war for a century because they had accepted the idea that war could only be won through suffering, that victory was something to be bled for over generations. Humanity had shattered that belief in a matter of hours. Thale stood abruptly, his massive frame casting a shadow over the table. You waited, he growled. You waited until we had weakened each other, until we were desperate, then you struck like cowards. Graves sighed, shaking his head. You still don't understand, do you? He leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. We could have done this any time. The weight of the words settled over the chamber like a suffocating fog. You think we waited for strategy? For an opportunity? Graves continued. No. We waited because we weren't interested. This was your war. Not ours. We watched. We listened. And when we were finally dragged into it, we finished it. Thale's jaw tightened, his breathing heavy, a deep growl rising from his chest. And what now? His voice was laced with bitterness. You expect us to thank you? To bow? To surrender our place in the stars because you decided to clean up after us? Graves shook his head. We expect nothing. We don't conquer. We don't rule. We don't demand tribute. He let his words settle before delivering the final blow. We just don't tolerate stupid wars. The chamber was utterly silent. No one had expected this. Not just the speed of victory, not just the sheer efficiency of it, but the fact that the humans had no interest in ruling over the losers. It made no sense to them. War was never just about fighting. War was about power, control, dominance. The idea that a species could win and then simply leave was alien to them in a way that was more terrifying than any weapon. Vrashik finally broke the silence. What will you do now? Graves stood, adjusting his uniform. We'll go home. The sheer casualness of the statement was almost insulting. Thale's claws scraped against the table as he fought to keep his composure. And if another war breaks out? Graves turned to him. Then we'll end it again. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Some had once seen humanity as irrelevant, an afterthought in the galactic stage. Now, they saw them for what they truly were. A force that did not play by their rules. A force that did not seek war, but if forced into one, would finish it with terrifying speed. A force that had no interest in conquest, yet could end entire civilizations overnight. For the first time in history, the galaxy truly understood what humanity was. And they were afraid. The human fleet remained in high orbit over Vorshan 6, but their presence felt more like an executioner's shadow than an occupying force. No patrols, no grand speeches, no attempts to seize power, just silence. The Zyrax Dominion had already surrendered, its leadership in full retreat, and the Imperium of Karash was paralyzed, its once mighty war machine reduced to fragments. The war was over, yet the consequences of its abrupt end had only just begun. Inside the Karash command bunker, War Master Korik Thale paced in a slow, deliberate rhythm, his claws clicking against the metallic floor. His rage had cooled, hardened into something else, something sharper, more dangerous. Across from him, Vrashik of the Zyrax watched, his mandibles twitching in uneasy contemplation. "They don't even care," Thale muttered, his voice low and venomous. "They didn't come to conquer, to rule, to dictate terms. They wiped us aside and now act as if we are beneath their notice." Vrashik didn't respond immediately. The truth of it was undeniable. Humanity had not installed new governors. They had not demanded reparations. They had ended the war and walked away as if it had been nothing more than an inconvenience. To an empire like the Karash, built on pride and conquest, it was the greatest insult imaginable. "What do you suggest?" Vrashik asked finally. His voice held no malice, only cold pragmatism. Thale's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "They think this is over. They think we are broken. But we are not. We are Karash. We have suffered before. We have endured. And we will rise again." Vrashik clicked his mandibles in disapproval. "You propose what? Another war? We barely survived the first encounter." He gestured toward the holodisplays, still filled with images of the destruction. "We had fleets, armies, supply lines. None of it mattered. They dismantled us as if we were an afterthought." Thale's claws flexed. "Then we must stop thinking in terms of war." A long silence stretched between them. Vrashik studied him, his multiple black eyes narrowing. "You mean—" Thale's lip curled. "We cannot beat them on the battlefield. That is clear. But wars are not only fought with ships and soldiers. We will learn from them. Study them. And when the time comes, we will strike in a way they do not expect." Vrashik leaned forward. "You would have us become shadows? Assassins? Saboteurs?" Thale's expression remained unreadable. "I would have us survive." The Zyrax leader considered his words carefully. His people had no love for the Karash, but they had fought beside them long enough to recognize the same wounds in themselves. A century of war had shaped them all, and now, in an instant, it had been ripped away. The question was not whether they wanted revenge. It was whether they could afford it. "What of their technology?" Vrashik asked. "How do we counter what we do not understand?" Thale's claws tapped against the table in thought. "We learn. We infiltrate. We adapt. If brute force will not serve us, then we will become something else." His eyes burned with conviction. "They believe they have ended us. Let us prove them wrong." For the first time since the war ended, Vrashik saw something dangerous in Thale's expression, hope. Not the desperate, blind kind, but something colder, more patient. A long game. A war that would not be fought in space battles or planetary sieges, but in the quiet moments where no one was watching. "I will consider this," Vrashik said carefully. "But understand this, Thale, if we do this, we do not act as Karash and Zyrax. We act as something new." Thale nodded. "Then let us become something new." Meanwhile, aboard the human command ship Indomitable, General Elias Graves stood before a vast observation window, gazing down at the ruined battlefields below. The once unbreakable fronts of the galactic war now lay in smoldering silence. The war had ended exactly as he had predicted, yet something unsettled him. He turned as Admiral Julia Monroe approached. "You're brooding," she said, arms crossed. "Not like you." Graves exhaled. "They'll never accept this." Monroe arched an eyebrow. "Which part? That they lost, or that we had no interest in ruling them?" "Both." She smirked. "They'll get over it." Graves shook his head. "No. Species like the Karash and Zyrax, they've built their entire existence around war. Their civilizations are structured around the idea that conflict is inevitable. We didn't just beat them, we shattered their purpose." Monroe's expression darkened slightly. "So you think they'll try again?" "Not in the way they did before." Graves turned back to the window, watching as human dropships completed final extractions of their personnel. "They won't send fleets. They won't declare war. But they will try to find another way to fight." Monroe considered this. "And what do we do?" Graves was silent for a long moment. Then he finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "We watch." The galaxy did not forget what had happened. It couldn't. The war that had defined generations, that had shaped economies, cultures, and entire civilizations, had been erased in hours. The power structures that had endured for centuries were now shattered, and in their place stood a single undeniable truth: humanity was beyond anything they had ever faced. The corridors of the Galactic Council buzzed with uneasy discussions. Diplomats and military strategists whispered in hushed tones, trying to make sense of what had transpired. Some called for peace, others for vigilance. And in the shadows, there were those who called for something else entirely. Korik Thale moved through the lower levels of the station, his every step purposeful. The official meetings had been pointless, filled with empty words and veiled accusations. He had no patience for such games. He had spent the past months ensuring the survival of what remained of the Karash Imperium, and now it was time to set the next stage in motion. A door slid open before him, revealing a dimly lit chamber. Inside, figures from different factions had gathered: former military leaders, intelligence officers, those who refused to accept that their empires had been reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. Among them was Vrashik, his dark eyes betraying no emotion. Thale stepped forward. "The humans believe they have secured peace." He let the words linger before continuing. "They believe that by removing our ability to wage war, they have removed our will to fight." A murmur spread through the room. "They think war is only fought with ships and armies," Thale continued. "They do not understand that war evolves." His gaze swept across the assembled figures. "We will not fight them as we did before. We will not build fleets or launch invasions. We will not give them an enemy they can crush." Vrashik spoke then, his voice calculated. "Then what do you propose?" Thale's lips curled into something between a smile and a snarl. "We become what they do not see. We move in silence. We learn their ways, their weaknesses. We make them question their own security, their own control." His claws flexed. "They ended our war. Let us make them regret it." There was a pause, then slow nods of agreement. The war, in its old form, was over. But a new kind of war was beginning. Far from the Council's deliberations, aboard the Indomitable, General Elias Graves reviewed intelligence reports. He had been right. The surrender had not been the end, only the beginning of something different. The Karash and Zyrax were wounded, but they were not dead. And wounded creatures were often the most dangerous. Admiral Julia Monroe entered, arms crossed. "New developments." Graves set the report down. "They're regrouping. Not militarily, but politically. Economically. Socially." She frowned. "You expected that." "I did. But it's happening faster than I anticipated." He leaned back. "They're adapting. Which means we have to as well." Monroe exhaled. "So, what's the play?" Graves looked at her, his expression unreadable. "We prepare for the war they think we won't see coming." The game had changed. But humanity was always ready to evolve.